when you sit down and study the language that you want to learn, what do you actually do? And what should you be doing to become fluent as quickly as possible? These are the kinds of questions that you have to be asking yourself constantly, because we as humans are inherently biased in the way that we approach studying for anything. We want life to be easy. Any person who's done any research online on how to learn a language, what are the best strategies, what are the best methods, how should I divide up my time between reading or listening or speaking, knows that although opinions vary, generally speaking, you should be spending some amount of time learning vocabulary, some amount of time reading books, some amount of time listening to people speak and understanding them, and some amount of time actually producing either written or spoken sentences yourself and expressing yourself in your target language. We're all aware of this. This is nothing new. This is a basic fact of learning a language. And yet, I bet if you were to ask yourself, how do I divide up my time between those aforementioned activities, whether you actually divide them up the way that anyone is actually recommending you do. The reason for this might be that you're biased towards choosing the easiest thing for you to do at any one point in time because you are human and because you're therefore lazy. Every single person knows that you have to spend a certain amount of time learning vocabulary, which is pretty easy to do. You can write it down in your notebook. You can add it to Anki or your flashcard system or whatever it is that you're using to learn your vocabulary. We also know we have to speak. But how do you speak? Unless you live in the country that speaks a language that you're learning, it might be hard for you to find people just here and there, unless it's your parents that you live with or your romantic partner or your roommate or whatever. Many of us, to learn a language, we have to go online and seek out, for example, tutors and pay them money and schedule a time and sit down with them on Skype or Zoom or whatever to talk in our target language. This takes time, it takes effort, and for many of us who are at least a little bit shy when it comes to interacting with others, it's a bit tough. I mean, it's a bit tough to be there 2 minutes before your lesson and suddenly you're wondering, wait, how do I say hello in the language I'm trying to learn? And you forget somehow, and then you're worried that you're going to come off as a complete bozo in the language, or you're worried about having to sit there and look at this person in the eyes and communicate with them, and you're worried you're going to be boring or that you won't know what to say or you won't be an interesting student. These are all reasonable things, I suppose, to worry about. They're very common. And the end result is that over time, you're going to change where you spend your precious study time, and you're going to adapt it by moving it towards the activities that take less mental energy. I myself have done this countless times. For example, when I was trying to learn German to a high level, I knew that I had a huge number of words that I had to learn to be able to read any text in German. So I know that, but I also knew that I had to spend a ton of time speaking about different subjects in German with Germans to get to the level of being able to express myself. If I just learn vocabulary, I won't be able to speak the language. I'll just be there like a computer waiting for an input. And yet, it was difficult. I mean, I would wake up in the morning and I would know, for example, that I have a italki lesson scheduled today at 1 p.m. where I have to speak for an hour in German. And I would be worried about it. I'd be thinking, oh, I've got so much effort I've got to spend on this. And I just wished I could be there with my Anki and my flashcards and my reading a book passively and going through everything with so much more pleasure than having to painstakingly plan, pay for, and speak for an hour with a native speaker. And so what would happen over time is I would keep scheduling fewer and fewer lessons with a native speaker every week and doing more and more vocabulary with the study time that I have. And over time, I would then realize, wait a second, I'm spending too much time on vocabulary and I have to correct myself and jump right back into speaking more. It was harder, it was painful, but in the end, it was actually more beneficial than spending yet another hour adding new flashcards or doing flashcard repetitions. And so it was sort of like this bias, this slant I had, like I'm trying to sail around the world, but I keep aiming to the left, so I keep having to correct the direction of my ship to make sure I don't sail into Lord knows where, the South Pole. And I feel like a lot of people are in the same situation. We start with this idea, yes, I know I should be speaking at least 3-4 days a week, assuming I can afford it or I have the time, and that this will help me improve a lot to actually speak for 3 or 4 hours a week in my in my target language. But how many of us actually do those lessons or those hours, if you're doing a conversation exchange for free, for example, every week? For example, with an Italian teacher on italki, which I've been speaking with for quite a while, she's had something like 8,000 lessons so far, according to her profile. And she tells me that every day she has about 8 to 10 lessons scheduled, and 3 or 4 people every day cancel. And it's like every single day there's some new excuse that comes up. And obviously some of these people have emergencies or things in their lives that come up, but a lot of people just can't push themselves to get on the computer or phone or whatever they're using to go and speak to her, because it's hard to speak Italian for a month. And a lot of people, even after a couple of days not speaking in their target language, they feel immediately rusty and they don't feel comfortable and they feel like it's going to be so much more effort than it really is. And so most people, I'm willing to bet, constantly need to adjust the steering wheel, so to speak, and push themselves back towards the right track, which is, for most of us, probably more speaking and less passive note-taking and passive vocabulary learning. Everything is important. We all know there are many elements that you need to learn a language, but I think most of us should be continuously forcing ourselves to speak more often. So here's my question for you. This week, I'm going to post this video on a Sunday. So as of this Sunday, the end of the week, how many times did you speak in your target language? And how many times would you have liked to, or should you? If the two aren't matching up, then do something about it. For the next week, aim to speak even more often. Schedule a couple of extra lessons, or make more appointments with your conversation partner, or get more conversation partners so that even if 1 or 2 fall through every single time, you have more so you can rely on, that in general you'll be speaking more often. Push yourself again in the right direction, because remember, the biggest thing that people use languages for in general is to speak. It's to sit across from someone and look them in the eyes and exchange feelings and information in a language. And if you don't practice doing that, even if it's on the internet, if you don't practice doing that, you'll never be able to do it, no matter how many hours you spend learning passively vocabulary. So once again, think about not what is easiest for you to do, not what is laziest, but think about what is right every single week, and make sure that you're hitting those goals to get where you need to be. Good luck.